Hey there, Craig. Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you too, Martin.
I see that sun's out, guns out for the podcast today.
Absolutely. This is what I love about Perth is it's actually nice weather and not sucky like Melbourne.
Oh yeah, I'm looking out the window at 28 degrees, no wind, and culture that survives the blast furnace of eternal 40s that you guys get. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's a dry heat. It's a dry heat, and that makes all the difference.
okay, clearly influenced your sense of humor. All right, I digress. We could sling crap all day, but let's move on to cutting the crap. So, quick review of last time. So, apart from me giving you some insights that you'd never had before in your life that have been transformative ever since, I think really what we started with, we first of all started with the idea that certainty is a really useful thing. So, I think you perhaps if you sort of give us the 30-second version of why people should want to be more certain in chiropractic.
Certainly, for sure. It certainly is something that, especially new graduates, always reach out for. They're always wanting to do something that makes them feel more certain around what they're doing is the right thing for patients. If we're certain, then that does actually translate over to patients as well, that they are more confident in the
Yeah.
practitioner's expertise and that they're in the right place, seeing the right person, getting the right care.
Yeah.
Um, but we also talked about, I suppose, the misconceptions or the myths around how do
Yeah.
we get this certainty as well. And of course, you taught me so much. You told me that that time and just giving it some time is the way to go. And we actually both agree that's not exactly the truth.
Yeah.
Was it? What else was
So,
there? Experience and
so experience. I mean, I think there's experience where you're not learning anything from your experience, and I think if we almost translate that idea to the idea that you were talking about as the suggestion for what people do, they align. And we'll come back to what that suggestion is, but it aligns with there's no point just having this passive experience that you're not actively learning anything from. There's also the idea, as you say, technique, that people believe that if I just have the right technique in my tool belt, then that will create certainty for me. And we spoke about how there's some big, that yes, you want to master your technique and you also want to not be a slave to it in terms of either being stuck in the view of one technique or being paralyzed by different information coming from two different technique perspectives. Um,
then
I
we
think
also
the
talked
next,
about philosophy, was it?
yeah,
Philosophy.
yeah, philosophy. That, look, I think we both agree, and that philosophy is a necessary component. Having an understanding of it is a necessary component of certainty. And I think my first step that I spoke about really centers on almost sort of putting a bracket around, well, which parts of it do you need to be certain? Because there's a certain, to me, you can go too far down that rabbit hole where you're not really increasing your certainty anymore. And there can be value in that in terms of your intellectual stimulation, but I think it stops actually increasing your certainty at a certain point. Scripting, I think we spoke about, I mean, we had a little bit of a point of we sort of
Different.
came to an
Yeah.
agreement in the end. It's just that
Well,
you were using the
yeah,
terms really sloppily, I think is the way that I remember it.
yeah, you know what? Oh, I've actually thought a bit more about that because I did make a comment that I've had some, I'm sorry, but dumbasses reach out for coaching that actually just needed a structure and a script to start from. And they absolutely needed it. So like whilst I said, yes, okay, you don't want to have a script just for just saying it and not meaning it. I think you need to mean and understand what you're actually saying. So that's a lot of the time with our coaching clients, we give that background information, set the contents or context around this is why we say these things and do these things at this time. And I think even you, with everything I've taught you about, influence literature and all that kind of stuff. And I'm so glad that you've come so far from that young
Yeah, just
man who could influence someone to get him a decent sized coffee. But like you got to do things in a certain way that to bring about the optimal result. So that does sort of come from scripting, but I still will agree it's got to be authentic.
yeah.
and it's got
which
to
is better
be,
accomplished by having a template rather than a script. So
yeah,
authenticity.
all right, I'll
Yeah,
leave it. All right,
yeah,
fine. But we also mentioned research as well.
yeah, yeah. And I think again, all for research think that it can be a powerful source of having chiropractic having impact in the world. And there's some big limitations to expecting that just we need the right piece of research all the time. So I think we can sort of leap beyond that one. People, if they're super interested, go back and re-listen to the last episode. And the final one, I think, was all about education, that idea that, well, I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
go to the right uni and they didn't teach me this, therefore I'm never going to be able to get it.
Or
And
alternatively, I went to the best school in the world, and so therefore I should just naturally be good at everything, and then the reality hits as well. So
yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it can be either side of it. And actually, just I heard something during the week which I thought was sort of germane to this idea of people continuing to blame the education that they had for the challenges that they're having in practice. So, one side of the equation that you were talking about, and it was in the context of people saying that, look, I had a childhood where there were certain traumas, or there were certain issues, difficulties, things that your parents did or didn't do for you. That yes, I think there is an understanding, and I come from a privileged position of not having a particularly traumatic childhood, but at a certain point, you've got to kind of be responsible for yourself. So if you're 2 years out from graduating, I think it's fair to sort of have a context of there were some areas that my university didn't prepare me for. They prepared me to be safe. They prepared me to do this. They helped me, get the registration. However, there were certain areas in terms of, technique or philosophy or whatever else that I believe I could have got more of at another program. But if you're still saying that story at a certain point, that becomes bullshit that you should have sorted out yourself. Like, cut the crap regarding that. Do you know? So I
yeah.
sort of look at it and I go, yes, we all have a point of challenge that we didn't have the advantages that somebody else did have. And that's the reality. And you have the responsibility to change it. And that means
Absolutely.
taking the
Yep.
steps of filling that gap, or in this scenario, I believe the great thing about us doing something like a podcast is it allows people to, for free, get access to perspectives that are potentially transformative for them. But the key word there isn't transformative, it's potentially. And the only reason that it's going to be more than, something that just wafts through their mind is if they actually do the exercises. So let's do that. So if people were really serious about increasing their level of certainty, last time you recommended that they take action in a particular way, which is essentially dealing with that idea that just experience is the key to growing in certainty. You just need to keep going. And we said, well, no, it actually needs to be an active experience, not a passive experience. And your suggestion for the way it could become active
was basically write down what you believe that chiropractic does or is, or what you believe that what you do does for patients, and then actually just literally test it against every person you see.
Yeah.
And evolve it over time. And that will definitely add to your clinical experience and clarity of what your purpose is as a chiropractor.
Yeah.
Then you
And I think
waffled on about some mumbo jumbo, and then
I was about to say something nice about yours. I was going to say, like, for somebody with such clear handicaps, that was quite a erudite point. But really, actually, if I look at that context, of the way that I would see what you've described there is, yes, you could passively wait for experience to maybe diffuse a few lessons to you over time, or you could say, no, I'm going to concentrate this and I want to get the benefit of 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of that ambient experience in 2 months or 3 months or 4 months by extracting the juice out of each interaction in terms of what it could teach me. My idea was, I guess, more abstract, which is the idea of
surprise.
yeah, if you are looking at the idea of philosophy being important but not sufficient for certainty, that was just me clearing my throat because this is an incredibly important point. What you want to do is actually sit there and think of each of those key ideas that are kind of the core ideas of chiropractic philosophy. Is that, do I believe, how certain am I that there is a universal intelligence that's separate to the matter of the universe? There is something bigger than that organizes or in some way animates that. How certain am I? 100% certain in that or less? And if less, why? Then am I certain there is an innate intelligence? How certain am I? 100% or less? Same process. And then the less abstract, slightly more concrete idea of because of those things, is the body self-healing, self-regulating, self-developing? Is that the way it's basically structured to be? 100% or less? If less, why? And then similarly with the nervous system, is the master control system, or has a central controlling role in the way the body works? How certain, etc. If that nervous system is interfered with by subluxation, that's a bad thing. How certain are you of that? And then the final bit of it, if I am able to apply an adjustment that removes nerve interference, that is a good thing in terms of the body's ability to self-regulate, to self-heal, to self-develop. How certain, if not why? So that we actually get that philosophical piece out of the way. So,
and you're looking for, is that sort of like you're just looking for consensus with that? Sort of, do we agree that this
no, not so much
feedback?
do they agree. No, I guess if I was doing it in a group coaching context, then yeah, we have it as a discussion. If you're not 100% on any aspect of that, why would that be? I'll often also break it down to how confident are you in it just by itself, and how confident are you in the evidence of it? Because often people will come to it like, look, my observations of the universe or my observations of the way the body works says that there is probably an innate intelligence, but there's no randomized controlled trials to prove that there's an innate intelligence. So I will look at that because I think that's a useful discussion to have, to realize that metaphysical concepts can't be tested with a randomized controlled trial. It's not the design to test that. You test them not inductively, but deductively. But really, for the purposes of this, I'm just wanting people to get clear on, if you're already 100% on all of those things, move on to step 2. And if you're not 100% certain on those things, then there probably is some value in you better understanding the philosophy before you do move to step 2. Because if you don't have, my model of it is, most people start with a very strong certainty around those philosophical principles. Where they lose certainty is that it kind of leaks out because they haven't clarified their understanding either of that philosophy or the application of that philosophy to a paradigm, and then the translation of a paradigm to procedures. So step 1, you want to get super concrete in that. If you're already concrete on it, just go to step 2. If you're not, then you need to spend more time in the philosophy land to increase your certainty.
I'm so glad you moved on from the first evolution of that program, where if you didn't agree on it, you said, get the fuck out. Is that
Yes, I've moved on from my asshole era.
Yeah, the arsehole era, that's right. But that, you know what, arsehole eras are fun.
Well, fun for you, less fun for everybody else, I'm guessing. All right, let's cut the crap, move on.
All right, what are we doing?
If somebody has done step 1 of your sort of approach of they've sat down and they've written out their belief around chiropractic and they're in the process of testing it, where to from there?
So okay, that's a really good question. I wish I'd given it more thought, but on the fly, I'll come up with, pull something out in line with the title, Cut the Crap. But no, just kidding. It for me, the next step is, once you've started the process, which is an ongoing process, is not something that you're going to go and do for 5 minutes and then go, oh my God, I'm so certain now. It's going to be an ongoing and evolutionary process. And I would say if you apply it, one of the things that comes out of it is what I call it, well, what everyone calls a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And this is something that I like. This is the thing that I get consensus on. When people sort of reach out for coaching, is actually having a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is you don't ever make a mistake with a growth mindset. It's a learning experience.
Yeah. I
You know,
guess by contrast, so growth mindset, I'm assuming you're using kind of the concept that Carol Dweck speaks about in that book Mindset, where you're sort of essentially talking growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Is that what we're talking about there?
Look, you know what? I was bitterly disappointed that Carol didn't reference me in that book. But yeah, something like that.
Yeah. All right. So I guess by contrast, just so that people understand it, a fixed mindset is kind of the idea that your capacity to do things is just innate. You're either you're good with people. I'm a good public speaker. I'm whatever, and that's it. You're either good at things or bad at things. You're talented or you're not, and there's not much you can do about it. Whereas a growth mindset, by contrast, is the idea that I can learn and develop, and as you say, a mistake is something that doesn't succeed isn't a mistake; it's a learning opportunity.
Yep. Yeah. So the first one, as you say, fix, and very hard to have create any change because effectively the person says it's all genetics, it's all my upbringing. I'm a result of everything up until now, and therefore I have no control about what happens to me going forward, which is crap. And then the other way of looking at it is go, look, okay, well, yes, culturally I've been brought up this particular way, and yes, there is certain things I'm naturally good at and I'm gifted in. Clearly myself, way more than yourself there, Martin. But at the same time, I acknowledge that I'm not actually good at everything.
Yeah.
And I will learn how to do something better, and I'm going to stuff up along the way, and I'm going to find out ways not to do it. And that's okay. And that's not the end of the world. And I will therefore find better ways of doing it. So that is like a fundamental agreement from a coaching perspective. If someone puts their hand up from a coach, I need help coaching. If they don't, like we talked about taking ownership, if they don't take ownership for themselves, that number one, no growth is going to occur. And if they don't even have a growth mindset in the beginning, I'm going to let you know that's actually usually when I say, go and do one of Martin Harvey's video things. And then once you've done that, give us a call or something like that. It's very hard to coach unless we have that mindset.
Yeah. It's actually,
and I love the mindset.
If I can just leap in there, we did an interesting thing a couple of years ago when we were talking about indicators of our ideal clients, where many people have gone through this, where you spend time thinking about who are our favorite people and what are their common characteristics, so that you can better set up your practice to have more of them and less of the arseholes. And one of the things that we came up with, because we were looking at some of these people going, yeah, look, if you look at it from a demographic perspective, there's not that much similarity. We couldn't sort of say, all right, we're going to pitch our messaging towards 35 to 40-year-old women with 2 kids, because some of our favorite people were very, very different from that. One of the core characteristics that we did come up with, though, was that they're people who do have a growth mindset. And I find like one of the people that I find challenging to have in my practice, the people that you look at and you go, oh, they're coming in, are people where, as it relates to their health, they have a very fixed mindset. This idea that I can't really do anything about it because that's my genes, or I can't do anything about that because I don't like to do X, Y, or Z, or it's just that various expressions of that. But that was one of the things that was delineating. And, I could have previously seen it in terms of people that I work with from a coaching or communication perspective, that the people with the highest level of growth mindset were the people who tended to take the most action and tended to deal better with challenges. And then looking at it through the lens of people who are taking on chiropractic care, you go, oh, it's the same thing. It's sort of the same thing in every aspect of life.
Yeah, and one I love like I've probably said this before, but I'll say it again because it's really important. And if you're not taking notes right now, if you're listening to this is going to blow your mind. I love it when those old whinging, moaning, groaning people come in, and no matter what, they just always just the same, that broken record, the click whir thing where you don't even say how you're going, you say just hi, and they say, yeah, good, thanks, and yeah, but I was a bit sore after that last visit, and blah 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 and blah blah blah, and moan and groan and whinge and carry on. So my favorite thing is to have that pattern interrupter for those people. And this, and have I told you how I do this or what I do?
Tell me again. I can't bring it to mind.
I'm still going through my chiropractic arsehole phase. I'm 25 years in, but I'm hoping to come out of it some stage. But this is my favorite arsehole hack.
There's that growth mindset right there.
Yeah. So imagine an older person whinging, bitching, moaning, groaning, and they're just sort of dumping all of their baggage onto you, and you're going, oh my God, here we go again. And what I say to them, usually wait for a pause. I usually say, Martin, I used to feel sorry for people like you. Pause. And the person just will look at me and go, what? I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll speak louder. I used to feel sorry for people like you. And they go, what? Because they're really ingrained. Yeah. And then I'll say, because what I recognize now is what you're feeling is because of all of the mischief you got up to in your younger days. And then more often than not, they'll either start smiling or worse, they'll actually start sharing what they were, oh yeah, you got me there. I remember the time, and they'll have some really either good stories or really scary stories, but it changes their click whir that they have going on. And I'm a bit cheeky with it. I remember this lady came in once, and she's about to turn 100 in August, and she's an amazing woman, very late to chiropractic care. We started seeing her when she was like 96. She always says, I wish someone had told me about this 100 years ago. And anyway, but she came in, and Heather had been married twice, and her first husband, who she had 4 daughters who all come into the practice, he passed away, and she ended up marrying the best friend, right, or the best man, right? So here's for a best man,
second drop.
Just move on. Anyway, so she says to me one day, and she's very prim and proper and well-to-do, and she says, I don't know if you know this, Craig, but I've outlived 2 husbands. And I've looked at Heather and I said, Heather, I think you're getting it all wrong. And she said, what do you mean? You've worn out 2 men. And she's gone completely red and starts laughing. But that's that pattern interruption, and we just try and get these people over and out of their patterns, and maybe challenge their beliefs, preferably in a fun way, to get it. But if from a chiropractic point of view, from a chiropractor wanting to grow, the first thing is you need to want to grow.
Yeah.
Like you need to, but for that to occur, you need to understand that I don't yet know all that I need to know.
Yeah.
And so you need to seek it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that if I look from the outside at the first 2 exercises that you've set up there, the first one is taking that idea of experience and saying, how can I extract the most out of this experience? And the second one is saying, can I be receptive to the information that I'm getting? Is it just going to come in and I'm just going to say, well, I can't alter that because of my existing talents? Or can I take that feedback, take that the gift of having something that challenges my beliefs and go, well, that I have the capacity to change what I believe. I have the capacity to change how I understand things. And that in doing so, I'm going to create a high level of certainty and ability to help people more.
Yep.
Right.
That sounds really, really intelligent, Martin. I'm so glad you're picking this stuff up. But of course, there's two people on this podcast. So what do you do in your
All right. So
little shanty thing?
Yeah, shanty thing. I just polished yours up to make it sound super beautiful, and then you give me that.
I can't help but every time you polish something up, I go, "Where's the other foot coming down?" Like it.
No. You're like a beaten dog. You're so used to being beaten, you can't even take a positive.
I've been to Bali a few times, Martin.
Yeah. All right. So for me, if once you are like, yes, no, I am certain about this philosophical perspective, I've thought through any reservation that I have around that. Now we want to go from one step, that really abstract perspective, to the next level of concreteness, which is what I would describe as a paradigm. Now, in the journey here, there are a couple of things that fit into the paradigm. There's one in terms of the model of subluxation or model of adjustment, that what's going on with the person when they're out of balance, when they're subluxated, what goes on when I intervene with an adjustment. That's step one, or step two in the context of our overall journey. Another step in terms of the paradigm is what I think of as clinical rules. I'm not going to go into that today, but just so you're aware, that's also an aspect of paradigm. So what I think in this scenario, in terms of paradigm, that I think people do that is crap, that they should cut, is that they take on someone else's paradigm, someone else's understanding, without thinking about it. So for a lot of people, I just take on the university paradigm of wherever I went. And that could be, as we spoke about last time, that could be from anywhere on that spectrum. From chiropractic is the manipulation of the spine and rehab and Graston and dry needling for the relief of uncomplicated low back pain before you refer to somebody better qualified to do all of the things that you do already, through to the kind of opposite extreme of that. And I don't need to map that out, but if you just take on what the university taught you without actually really questioning that and thinking that through, and that I think is both through just that sitting there and thinking about it, is that truly what I believe, and also ties in with that idea of what you're talking about, of questioning those beliefs actively through the taking care of people. But I think some people might reject or question the university one, but then they just replace it with another one that they don't necessarily think through. So they might take on a technique paradigm of whatever named technique, or a practice management paradigm of practice management guru that I signed up with says that this is what we do and this is what we say and this is your care plans, and you're not really thinking it through for yourself. And those things, I think, give you this almost sort of artificial boost in certainty. It's like, taking a drug or something where you're not really building your own internal, organic, authentic certainty. You're essentially borrowing the level of certainty of the person who gave it to you. And the challenge with that artificial certainty is that it tends to collapse under challenge. So if somebody's body hasn't read the textbook and respond in the way that that paradigm might predict in an optimal world that it would, you're kind of lost. And so you have that happen enough times and it starts to degrade your set point of certainty. So that's kind of what is the one piece of crap that people tend to have in terms of where they get their paradigm from that they need to cut. The second crap is they don't actually think through very specifically what the testing that they do on a first visit, on a reassessment, or their analysis that they do visit to visit, how that actually plugs into the paradigm that they have. And for both of these, I think part of it is that they've never just drawn a simple flow diagram of this is what happens when somebody's subluxated. This is what happens when I do an adjustment. This is how I know when somebody, how based on that flow diagram, when somebody is subluxated. So if I can be a little bit more clear with that. So step two then is, let's get clear on that. Let's actually do a flow diagram of what is happening when somebody's subluxated. And it might be on the same flow diagram, but what is my process for assessing someone on a first visit or a re-exam? How can I tell that this is happening in that person? So, for instance, in terms of the way that I might coach somebody to do that, I would look at it that most of the contemporary models of subluxation are now really what you might describe as disafferentation models of subluxation. And what, if we were to sketch that out, we'd say, well, something is happening with the joint. So whether that's a lack of motion seems to be what a lot of the focus is on at a spinal segment, or if you were to take a CVP perspective, that an alteration in overall alignment, either of those things or both of those things create an increase or stress or strain on the surrounding soft tissues. Those soft tissues are richly innervated with mechanoreceptors, nociceptors, etc. And so when there's a constant abnormal stress or strain, there's a constant abnormal pattern of firing of those receptors into the spinal cord, and then going on from there. When that happens, there's an impact in terms of then going into the central nervous system and abnormal input into the brainstem spinal, into the brainstem and the nuclei of the central nervous system. But we can almost look at that as a black box for our purposes. And then there's these spinal cord mediated reflexes where that's going to alter the output of the autonomics, but also the output into the motor flow, which if you don't have proper control, say, of your shunt stabilizers there, so your erector spinae, then you're going to have poorer control of that subluxated area. And so that you can just sketch this out in a little flow diagram of what's happening. But then you really want to go that next step. Once you've got that on a piece of paper, you then want to be able to say, all right, with my testing, how can I tell if this is going on with somebody? And if so, how can I measure that so that I know that I'm delivering on the promise, that I'm getting less of this disafferentation? So for an example, I don't want to do people's exercise for them because I actually think the value is in sitting down and going, oh, shit, how do I know that that's happening? But if we look at step one of that, it starts off with there being an abnormal joint motion or position. So you might put in there, I can tell that because there is a change in palpation, or there's an alteration in range of motion that I can measure by inclinometry. And if we look at, say, the abnormal input into the central nervous system, where we're talking about input into the brainstem, cerebellum, those sort of things, you could look at things like, I could do balance testing to give me an idea of, is there asymmetrical input? But I want you to do that for as many of those steps as possible so that you actually then start to go, am I, when I'm testing somebody, doing something that is aligned with that? Because another thing that people do that I think is crap that you need to cut is that they're doing testing that is for pain syndromes and having a practice paradigm that is based on subluxation or function. So we kind of want to, if that's there, you're going to be leaking certainty all over the place. So if all your testing is about provoking or isolating pain, and you're saying your paradigm is about promoting function, there's a big disconnect that you're going to be leaking certainty through. So if I cut to the chase for that, all I would suggest that people do is map out a diagram. What's happening when somebody is subluxated, and how can you measure that? How can you tell that that's going on? And is it mild, moderate, or severe by the testing that you do currently? And are there areas where you go, actually, I'm not measuring that at all? What could I do to measure that?
Yep, I agree.
Excellent.
Oh, there you go. Goodness, you heard it here first. I actually agree with Martin Harvey.
All right. So this is good.
Can I just add a little bit to that too? Because in we do a program called Care Plans, and within Care Plans, I put together a little presentation about the biggest mistakes in regards to care plans. And one of the mistakes that people make is a limited data care plan, where
Yeah.
they're not testing either the right things, or they're very focused, as you say, on that pain side of things, but at the same time wanting to promote function. So yeah, I mean, the tests that you do, the structure that you have in place has to assess how well you're doing the thing that you're doing. And if you're improving function, then it needs to test for that. If you're improving just more of the pain, then of course you're only going to have pain tests. But I would say the best recommendations I can have for maybe people who are sort of in a state of change or open to change is cast the net wide. Do more tests than you ever thought you needed to do on different parts of the spine, and do it again and again and again, and just observe that over time and add that to your clinical experience as well,
Yeah.
because that will also give you that certainty. I see, unfortunately, there's institutions out there that they'll say to their students, hey, if the person only has neck pain, you only get to touch the neck, and you do not get an ability to test or anything else. And I think that is the biggest crap thing that does not serve our profession. And you know what? I think new grads, you guys, you got to be doing more. Do more tests, learn more, take more in, and so you've got a better understanding of the whole person, and come up with a good care plan.
Definitely. All right. So if we're going to summarize everything from this episode, the key things then that we've spoken about there is that it's really important that once we've done step one of that process of starting to test your beliefs, that we also need to make sure that we are in the right mindset to learn from that. And that really means you've got to take on that growth mindset of almost looking at where things are challenging for you, that's a gift, that the things that are most challenging are the things that you're going to grow most from. And so leaning into that discomfort of allowing your ideas to be challenged and changing as a result of that, that's really the key there. In terms of what I was talking about, I was saying that once you've clarified that philosophical perspective, we then need to make that more concrete. And step one of making it more concrete is to start addressing the paradigm. And within that, it's actually doing that difficult process of sketching out in a flow chart what is happening in that person's body when they have a subluxation, what's happening from a bone or joint perspective, what's then happening in terms of the nervous system, and then what's then happening with other tissues that interacts with that complex process and physiology that's happening in the body when somebody is subluxated, and how can I measure that that is happening? What am I currently doing that gives me insight into that process so that I can start to build a framework of knowing how much somebody's body is changing separate to how they are feeling.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Excellent.
When a patient comes in to see you, Dr. Martin Harvey, how do you explain the disafferentation model to a new patient, like or just a lay person?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I would say it like this. So if, let's say I'm doing it in the context of somebody in the practice, I would look at it as this is one of those Russian dolls where I wouldn't give that full picture to them that you might do if you're explaining to somebody with a scientific background. But if we just say, look, this is average, relatively bright person, I would say, so you can feel how this area is not moving properly in your spine. That's what we call a subluxation. And essentially what's happening there is the vertebra isn't moving the way that it should. And that causes misfiring of little nerve endings that are wrapped around that joint. And that causes a couple of things. It causes that tenderness that you can feel. And it also causes the wrong signals to go from this joint into your spinal cord and then up into your brain. And the way that your body works is the information coming in gives your brain a picture of what's going on in the environment, and then it sends signals based on that out to your body. So if you're getting cranky, wonky, weird signals from this nerve up to your brain, that's going to have a local effect, but it can also have a broad effect where your brain's just not getting as good a quality picture of what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yep. Cool.
That's about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's because it's a funny one. Like I'll talk about more from just a decreased body awareness. Like just literally say, hey, you got these parts of your spine in there, and I maybe on the X-ray, say, did you know that was there before we took the X-ray? No, exactly. So what's happened? These subluxations in your spine, it lessens your brain's ability to sense what's going on in your body.
Yeah.
And that's why this is there without you even knowing about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we do with adjustments is our job is to open those up. And the instant we adjust them, what the research shows, thanks, Heidi, is it actually increases your brain's awareness of what's going on. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to, some parts, your brain's going to say, what the hell am I standing like that for? And it's going to tighten up some parts, loosen other areas. It'll change the way you walk. It'll change the way your body heals. In some cases, your body's going to go, crap, I didn't realize that's not fully healed, and now I have to start healing that thing.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a few different changes. And that's what we do with adjustments, is increasing the brain's awareness of what's going on so I can make really good decisions about what needs to happen.
I love it.
So you like that? I'll write it, I'll put it in my book and I'll dedicate it to you, man. It's okay.
Thank you. I like it. Very elegant. Excellent.
Anyway,
all
digress.
right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to episode 2 of Cut the Crap. I hope it is helping you in a huge way to increase your level of certainty in practice, because there are people around the world who need what you can give them. And look forward to catching you all next week for episode 3.
Thank you.